All right, welcome to part 4, April 27th, 2022, part 4 of the Rob Noerr Lecture Fan 10-part series heading into the 2022 midterm elections. We're doing once a month update on the campaign, where everything's at on the midterms. We've done 3 already, 3 one-hour shows. They're on my YouTube channel from before that. I don't know if you've got them up, Rob, or if you haven't been. Cool.
I haven't, yeah.
Okay, cool.
As long as I'm allowed. I think I missed one because I had a community strike from YouTube, so I wasn't allowed to update.
Okay,
videos.
nice.
Yeah.
Nice. What I find is funny is like the older generation, they always refer to it as being put in Facebook jail or YouTube jail. But
I'm
anyway,
sort of I'm sort of on YouTube probation, I guess would be the
nice. So part 4, it's I can't believe we're already almost halfway there. We've only got about 6 months left. I mean, really only 6 months left to the election. So we'll go for about an hour here, just do a quick update on where things are at. So overall, what do you think? Anything changed in the last month?
Believe it or not, I think that things have gotten worse for the Democrats. To me, what the Democrats' message and the establishment message has been for so long has been that they need to censor and control the flow of information because their ideas are so bad. And so, regardless of what happens, if Elon Musk ends up buying Twitter or not, they only have one move, and that move's always to tighten their fist. And so they always out themselves as the authoritarians they are. So now it's so funny. I saw some lefties that are maybe more moderate or more sensible on Twitter saying things like this. Why is it that free speech is automatically synonymous with the right wing? Well, because you made it that way, because the left made it that way. And I think that people, not only is the situation on the ground in Ukraine terrible, the situation on our border, inflation, the economy, all of these metrics are terrible. But now, in addition to that, they're outing themselves as saying, oh my goodness, if we can't control the narrative, it's going to be even worse for us in the midterms.
Totally. And they've done the same thing with like the American flag, to where now the American flag is viewed as this like right-wing thing, and it's like, why would you guys do that? I don't know. I've sort of sensed a shift in the last month, I feel like, in favor of Republicans, and I don't know if it has to do with like the Twitter story, or I think it's maybe the Florida story. Like, there's so many stories out of Florida. That's been a huge thing. The Disney stuff. I feel like this is a big deal. And so I've been guest hosting the radio show here, and we're actually having, right now in Montana, we're having our school board elections. And this is the first time in my lifetime where people have been fired up about school board elections, and people are paying attention. And this is the first time that every single race is contested. And I mean, it's gotten really political here in Montana with the school boards because of critical race theory stuff, the masking requirements. These school boards, enforce mask requirements on kids, and that really upset parents. And then we also had a big story here about some of these adult sexual content books that were, and then the left loves to like push like pornography on, or adult sexual content on children, and then when conservatives are like, yeah, no, we don't think that you should be teaching little kids about adult sexual content and pedophilia and child pornography, and that's not appropriate for little kids. Oh, that's censorship. You guys are believing in censorship. It's like, no, that's not censorship. That we have America has a long history of protecting little kids from adult sexual content. But I don't know. I feel like this little kids thing and the sexualization of little kids, I don't know. I feel like that's really, like, I think the Democrats are losing a lot of people with that issue.
Yeah, I mean, something that my big issue is corruption. I talk about it all the time. So one issue that I was very much into from the 3-4 years I've been live streaming was sort of the Russiagate thing. The problem is, explain to the guy that's working 9 to 5 to feed his family, oh, let me tell you about the Durham report. Let me tell you about the Mueller and the thing. It's hard to resonate. Like, it's complicated. There's a lot of names. But one story that did resonate was Epstein, right? And because a powerful person, sex trafficking underage kids, the most heinous of crimes imaginable, connected to some of the biggest players, not just politics, but also culturally, including many, many in power on the left. Now, unfortunately, that story got buried, but it kind of is the same thing rearing its head now. I think that normal people that are independent, even moderate Democrats and certainly conservatives, are shocked at just how perverse many of these people are. And, you know, at some point, the Democrats are going to have no choice to just double down on the corruption or sort of triage and say, like, look, we're going to put a tourniquet in this and say, yeah, you're right, we shouldn't be sexualizing kids, but we're going to endorse our other left-wing policies. But the more they double down on it, I mean, I don't know what much more to say other than even Democrats, when they read the bill in Florida, were in favor of it. I mean, even
Right.
Democrats were in favor of it.
Right.
And people realize, and the other thing, just, you know, real quick, is this. I think that this is a huge mistake for the Democrats, because people are realizing, if you're lying to me so blatantly about this, were you lying to me about the Georgia voting bill? Were you lying to me about a bunch of stuff connected to COVID? Were you lying to me about a bunch of stuff about how Republicans are evil, racist, et cetera, et cetera? And between COVID and this stuff and the blatant lies that we've been told, people telling us we couldn't go to restaurants while they went to restaurants, we couldn't go to funerals while they had large parties. I think the average person, even the average moderate left-wing person, saying enough is enough. We can't stand by this.
Totally, and of course, the Democrats were lying to them about all of those other things, and so, you know, I think that's absolutely right. I don't know. I think, like, I don't know. The sense I have is that this is what we're feeling right now. I guess is exactly why the midterm elections are always so hard, because it's much easier to be criticizing. You know, the Democrats are in power, we're out of power. It's easier to criticize them, but it just feels like it's almost like overwhelming, the amount of, like, the American people, and the numbers are just continuing to get worse and worse for Democrats. And the Democrats, they don't seem to be capable of changing course. That's what's so weird about it, is like they will not change. It doesn't matter how many Hispanics they lose on these issues. It doesn't matter how many you know, other Americans they lose on these issues. They simply will not change. And I think it's partially because I think the Biden administration is terrified of the radical left. They're just doing whatever the radical left will push them to do. And it's so weird, and it just makes them look weak too.
Yeah, I mean, the inmates are running the asylum. That's absolutely true. There was a streamer, his name's Ethan Klein. He does like H3 or something. I don't know him very well, but Jordan Peterson he removed his interview he had with Jordan Peterson, and Jordan Peterson told him, like, listen, these woke people, eventually you're going to make a mistake and they're going to come for you. That actually happened this week. He said some things that the woke people considered homophobic. Now he's losing sponsors left and right. This is similar to what's going on with the Democrat Party. When you embrace and amplify the most extreme voices, you're kind of beholden to them then. And so at this point, what theoretically could the Biden administration do at this point on immigration policy? Right? They can't be like, okay, we want amnesty for the dreamers and things like that, but we do need to secure the border. They can't say that because they've already embraced the idea that that's racist. So they can't walk that back and be like, oh, wait, it's not racist now. They can't do it. And, you know, that's why I think what you're going to see is they're going to accept their loss. But they're going to try to win key areas where there are Democrat strongholds by rallying the base. And I think the first shot was fired today with Biden saying, we're going to do what we can to forgive student loan debt. It's basically buying votes from these radicals. And then, you know, it's clearly it'll cause more inflation, just like the $1 trillion they've already spent. It will be very unpopular in a lot of sort of moderate areas and conservative areas, but they don't care. They want to make sure that they don't get totally shellacked because they're being attacked from both ends, from the more progressive end and from conservative. So they're gonna go back to the well and bow down to the more progressives.
I mean, the base is so just dejected and just sad right now. I mean, I don't know any leftist. It is so, like, when you see some of these leftist Twitch streamers pretend like they're excited about Joe Biden, it is just so obviously fake, and it's like, dude, come on. Please don't pretend like you actually like Joe Biden. Like, everybody knows that everybody voted for Joe Biden literally just because he wasn't Trump. Nobody's actually excited about him. And Joe Biden has never been a leftist, a hard died. He's like a Hillary Clinton. The way I view him is he's like Hillary Clinton in the sense that he'll say or do anything. to get elected and to stay in office. He doesn't have any values. He doesn't have any principles. He doesn't have any, like, he's not a true believer, but he's so weak that he won't stand up to the radical left. And so that's why he's nominated all of these extreme leftists. And the student loan thing, I think is a really great point, especially because Joe Biden was always against forgiving student loans. I like got reluctantly drug along to saying like maybe I'll do $10,000, but only if Congress does it. And then he does the extension to August 1st, so it sets him up perfectly to do something kind of right as ballots are going out. I guess that's right when a lot of states start mailing out their initial ballots, and so it's just so obviously political. And that's all they've got. I mean, they can't do anything. They can't accomplish anything. And Joe Manchin is out there, trying to, I guess, now say that, maybe we'll reconsider some of these, parts of the Build Back Better, but overall it's not going anywhere. They haven't accomplished anything. The base is outraged because no immigration reform, no health care reform, no gun control, like none of their issues, they haven't done anything. And so the whole student loan thing is just such a disaster, and it's incredibly unfair. It really helps doctors and lawyers, because doctors and lawyers are the ones that have the most student loan debt. And so massive amounts of student loan forgiveness is just going to benefit doctors and lawyers and people that chose not to go to college or paid off their loans. It's just so incredibly unfair. But, I think you're right. I think that's kind of like the last option that they have to try to get their base jazzed up, because the base is just so depressed. And I've always been a believer that American elections are about turning out the base. It's not about getting the middle, the independent voter. There's some of that, I think. I mean, it's important to appeal to the moderates in the base, but when you have turnout as low as we do, you can basically win elections by just turning out your hardcore base.
Yeah, I agree. And, listen, to any progressive that's listening, this is just lip service. I mean, maybe Biden will go through. He hasn't gone through doing anything with student loans yet. We've heard this song and dance from Democrats before. Oh, yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to do it. And then they don't do it. Now, even if he does do it, I assure you, and I said this when the 2020 election was going, Biden's not a progressive, right? And neither is Nancy Pelosi. They're just paying lip service, right? They're not actually going to do anything. I said, for example, if you're a vehement supporter of Black Lives Matter, the worst thing you could do is elect Joe Biden, because they're just going to ignore you for the next 4 years. Until every election, that's what the Democrats do. They fracture us based on these immutable characteristics, and they say, our opponents hate you because of your race or because of your sexuality or because of your sex, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We'll take care of you. And then they do nothing. In fact, it becomes worse for all of those groups that they talk about, and they ignore you until it's election time, and then they speak up about it. So, there'll be talks of forgiving student loans. Mark my words, there'll be more talks of ghost guns and banning bump stocks and banning ARs. This is just red meat for the base. This isn't anything that will help us with inflation, with the incoming recession, with our losing stance in the world, how weak we look now, at the crisis at the border. None of that. They don't have any plans to address any of that. All they have is to go back to the same well that they've been going for 20 years, promise a bunch of stuff to their base about getting rid of the Second Amendment, forgiving student loans, and that's it. That's the only option they have at this point.
Totally. Have you ever seen that where you go to Google Trends and you can type in like a phrase on Google Trends and it'll show you like when it went up? And if you go in and you type like Black Lives Matter or BLM, there's these huge spikes in, 2008, a huge spike, 2012, a huge spike, 2016, a huge spike, 2020, a huge, that never gets talked about outside of the 4-year campaigns. And there's all sorts of issues like that. And it's just so patently obvious. Frankly, should be an area where like the American people, we should come together on this issue of the corruption in Washington, because the Democrats and the Republicans are both content to just continue to exist in Washington and continue to spend trillions of dollars and give it out to their buddies and do government contracts and stuff like that. And really, it's, frankly, we could make friends with some people on the left and be like, look, guys, we may disagree on what needs to go on, but we both dislike the fact that this swamp is just corrupt and they don't care about either of us, and they're just continuing to be corrupt and just living in D.C. and just taking this country down.
Yeah, I agree. It's something I say often. Now, I've been struggling lately because even people that might have economic theories that I massively disagree with, like communism and things like that, I could work with them. I could talk with those people. I have a difficult time reaching across the aisle to people that want to teach 5-year-olds about sex. To me,
Oh,
that's the red
oh,
line. And so there's,
totally.
but in general, there are many left wingers that aren't that. And you're right, we could reach across the aisle. It gets to another point, though. I mean, you're correct that Republicans are, many of them in positions of leadership, are content to leave this go. I think that the primaries are going to be as, if not more important than the general election. When you look at the fact that we're likely to see someone like Kevin McCarthy as Speaker of the House, here's a person that not only said that now we know said that he was going to ask Trump to resign, but also seemed to signal that he wanted conservative politicians, Republicans, some of them, to be censored on social media. It does us no
Unbelievable.
good if there's the Republican victory, and that's what the Republicans put forth.
No, I was just so blown away by that. I've always kind of know Kevin McCarthy as a rhino, kind of an establishment, kind of hack type of guy. But wow, actually, so especially calling on Twitter to like ban these conservative Republicans. I mean, for a Republican to say that at a time when censorship is one of the biggest issues facing our country, and the lack of free speech and the lack of respect for free speech and this big tech censorship is literally one of the most horrible, dangerous things going on in our country, to have McCarthy, and I just don't understand it, man. Even so, but then all the Republicans rally around him, even good Republicans like Jim Jordan and stuff, and I'm just like, what is going on here? And then you've got Donald Trump endorsing, Dr. Oz, and then and Trump endorsing J.D. Vance in Ohio, and I'm just like, dude, what is happening here? That actually kind of makes me that gives me less hope for, like, I've been feeling really good about these midterm elections, but then you see Kevin McCarthy is still has the support of the GOP Congress, Trump endorsing Oz and JD Vance. I don't understand it. What is going
I think
on?
that's been a problem. It's been a problem with Republicans for a long time. Like when John Boehner retired, when he was speaking publicly, he could barely hold his contempt for his constituents. I mean, it was obvious that John Boehner hated the people that voted for him. He put on a face to get elected, and then behind the scenes, he was the exact same as Nancy Pelosi, as Chuck Schumer. That's who he was. He was someone who was an elite, who felt he was better than the people that he represented, and thought that they were 10-toothed rubes or racist or extreme rednecks and stuff like that. That's how he felt about him. So, yeah, I mean, it's troubling to see a lot of these endorsements, people still sticking up for McCarthy and things like that. But although we do need to fight our best to make sure that as voters we let them know that that's not acceptable, I think what's even more hopeful than the 2022 midterms is what you started off talking about, which is the state legislators. I think you're seeing a crop of state legislators that are done with that. I think you're seeing it in Florida. I see it in Pennsylvania with people that are coming up through the state that's like, no, we don't care. We don't care what Kevin McCarthy says. That's not who we are. We are populists. We are real conservatives. We're going to push back against this corruption, and I'm hopeful at that level. And to be honest, in the long run, that's more important. The cultural implications of
Totally.
people fighting back at school boards and the local governments, that's going to be more important. So although I still think we could have those big national wins if we push hard, it'll be difficult because there will be rhinos. But I'm hopeful for the future 6-8 years down the road, because people like McCarthy are not going to be able to maintain power with all of these sort of populists that are coming up.
Totally. And yeah, like I totally agree about the local stuff and the school boards. And I mean, it's just weird because, for such a long time, the Democrats and the socialists, they've actually really focused on local politics, and they've put themselves into these city council positions and school board positions, and they of course won those city council positions and school board positions by pretending to be, oh, I'm not political, and oh, blah, I'm just a normal person, blah blah. And meanwhile, they're like, DSA members and all these extremists. And I see more interest in local politics than I've ever seen in my life, and particularly about the school board. And it's kind of cliche to say people are waking up, but like I've always said from the very beginning, like one of the great things Donald Trump did, maybe the most important thing Donald Trump did for America, was to make people see how truly corrupt Washington, D.C. and the media really is. And the Democrats are just killing themselves with how extreme they are and without any changing. So I think you're right. And that's important to get these state legislators and city councils and school board and you name it.
Well, what's awesome about the United States is it is the greatest country in the history of the world. Although there are flaws, it is the best that we've ever seen. And the people of the United States, even ones that I would disagree with politically, are fantastic. So what happens is, as what's occurring, what you said, with all of these positions of leadership kind of being dominated by these radical or establishment sort of left-wing people, the warts were able to be covered up because the American people were still great. They're still making it work. It didn't matter that the leadership was corrupt or incompetent because the American people could, in general, still make it work. But what happens when a bunch of crises hit at once? Well, all of a sudden the mask slips, and that's exactly what happened. And so you got Joe Biden in there, who's an incompetent. Somehow, the person they put as they would love nothing more than to get rid of Joe Biden right now. But who's in line? Kamala Harris. She's worse, and the Democrats know it. So it's like, we can't do it. We can't get rid of Biden because Kamala's waiting in the wings, so we have to stick it out with Biden. And so you see the disaster that was Afghanistan, the disaster that's the border crisis, the disaster that was all of their BS claims about COVID that's now coming to light, the hypocrisy. And so the corruption and the incompetence is now a light's being shown on it. And I mean, it's not just me saying this. It's not just the average people that are noticing it. You're actually seeing sort of the establishment media comment on it. Like I read an article in Politico like 2 weeks ago that was just like, basically, Democrats off the record are saying, we know we're about to get pounded in the midterms, and literally there is nothing we could do. We don't have a message. We don't know what to say because they've relied on controlling the narrative so much, and the fact that things just organically have been pretty good in this country for so long that as soon as there's legitimate crisis and they're losing control of the narrative, the mask falls. And I think that's what you're seeing. And I hope that we could build on that momentum going forward. It's not enough to just win one election. It's enough to remember this moment in time going forward. So when they say, we want more government control, if you just give us more control, they cause the problems. And then they say, well, the solution's to leave us have more control. I think people are waking up today.
So I was just looking at when the Washington Post, because you were talking about Hunter Biden and they're not getting rid of him. I'm sort of wondering if he is going to get pushed out, and mostly because of his corruption. And so then I was looking, okay, the Washington Post put out their big story inside Hunter Biden's multi-million-dollar deals with the Chinese energy company, a huge Washington Post expose on Hunter Biden. That was March 30th. So I think that must have been like right before we did the last one or right around that time. Yeah. But I still, and that's continued. It's been continuous stories about the Hunter Biden and the Joe Biden stuff. And just recently there was that story about how one of Hunter Biden's business partners like visited the White House like 19 times or whatever. And, Joe Biden is saying, oh, I never talked to Hunter Biden about his overseas business dealings. And it's like, really? Then why are all these pictures and all these visits and all this emails and all of this other stuff going on? And so I don't know. I just thought it was so strange that the Washington Post and the New York Times were confirming the Hunter Biden laptop was real. I'm like, are they trying to force Joe Biden out? But then there was a story that Joe Biden is actually like telling people behind the scenes he plans to run in 2024.
Yeah, I mean, it will be, mark my words, it will be Michelle Obama that will be the candidate in 2024.
Oh,
That's
man.
What it's going to be.
Okay.
Because it doesn't matter what her policies are. It's that the image is what they want. And
right.
Michelle Obama is a very great speaker. She's charismatic. All of that's true. But she also hits the right demographics. And it'll be a story that the media, then instead of focusing on what will she do, it'll be focused on her, the person.
They've like deified her.
Yeah.
They've like deified her.
But with Joe Biden, I think that there's sort of a two-pronged thing going. They know they're going to need a scapegoat, right? And so Joe Biden will fit that bill eventually. They hesitate to pull the trigger because Kamala Harris is there. If it wasn't Kamala Harris, if it was someone that was popular, if Michelle Obama was the vice president, Joe Biden would have been gone 6 months ago. No doubt in my mind. Like, they don't want him there. They realize that he's an albatross, but Kamala Harris is a bigger albatross. So totally. They can't get, and there was this old joke, right, by Dave Chappelle, where he was making a race joke, and he's like, if you're going to be the first black president, you need like a Mexican as your vice president, because, that's the only way they won't want to get rid of you. And although that's kind of absurd, the race aspect of it, the argument that he's saying is, if you're going to be an ineffectual president, the best thing you could have is an even more ineffectual vice president, because that's job security. They're not going to get rid of you for someone that's worse. I think the other thing real quick that's going on is they're going to use this as leverage for Joe Biden. My gut feeling is this is what happens. The deal was we'll get Joe Biden elected because we don't have anyone else. He's seen as a harmless face, but he'll just ride in the shadows. And then us behind the scenes, Ron Klein and Victoria Nuland, will run the show. But I think Joe Biden started to go off script a little, right? And he started to come out and say and do things and advocate for things that they're like, wait a minute, Joe, we're in control, not you. And I think stories are being used that they're going to go to Biden and be like, we made you, we could break you. Either you play ball and you do exactly what we say until the 2024 election, and then you're going to gracefully bow out and leave Michelle or someone else come in, or we're going to ruin you. We will release all of these stories. So your reputation can either be a doddering old man that had career public service, or it could be you went out after a 40-year career as incredibly corrupt. Your choice. And I think that that's what's going on.
I mean, that's always been the concern with foreign countries doing the same thing and controlling Joe Biden by the same. I mean, once you do a corrupt deal with Joe Biden, if you're the Chinese Communist Party, then you've got that blackmail, and you can always hold that over Joe Biden's head. And we know for a fact that Joe Biden was doing deals with Communist Party entities and organizations.
It's the same with Ukraine. Whatever your feelings on Ukraine are, just because it would someone that we would consider an ally, you don't want a foreign power, be it ally or enemy, to have that sort of leverage. Because I want a president that's concerned about our country first. If he's beholden to Ukraine, and Zelensky could say, listen, and we know this, we know that there's audio tapes with Poroshenko talking to Biden where they're admitting, hey, we stopped the investigation into your son. The audio's out there. I've heard it, right? And so all Zelensky has to do, if Joe Biden decides that it's best for the country to say, hey, we talked to Putin, here's a peace deal that we came to, and Zelensky goes, no, I don't think so. We're not going to do it, because Zelensky will tell Biden, if you don't play ball and do exactly what I want, we'll ruin you. And so it's very troubling. It's the same problems we have with all of these career politicians. They've engaged in corruption so many times over and over that at this point, they're beholden to so many interest groups and so many foreign powers that they, even if they meant well, they can't do anything because they'll be exposed as corrupt if they don't play ball.
Totally. And we need people to be exposed. Did you see that all of the Senate Democrats who are in swing Senate seats, including Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, New Hampshire, North Carolina, Wisconsin, these Democrat senators are running away from Joe Biden as fast as they possibly can, especially on the immigration issue, and particularly this Title 42 thing. I mean, I think it's just absolutely insane. First of all, we shouldn't have to have Title 42 to send people home if they come here illegally. That's just how the law should be always. We shouldn't have to say we're in a public health crisis to send people home. It's like, no, but that should but the fact that he's actually going to get rid of it at a time when we're having over 200,000 plus encounters on the border every single month, multiple millions and millions of illegal aliens streaming in every year, and he's going to just open the floodgates. And of course, you know, his immigration policy has been a horrible this entire time. They're literally just processing illegal aliens and then letting them into the country and then sending them on you know, airplanes and buses all around the U.S. But I don't know.
Lecture, they're giving them smartphones, right? That solves everything.
Yeah, just to track them. I couldn't believe that they actually are doing that, and they actually defended it by saying that's how we're going to track them. I mean, it's so preposterous.
The best part about that, I didn't hear anyone else in the country say this. When Psaki was asked this question, she said, "Well, what would you want us to do? We're using smartphones and ankle monitors." Okay, well, there's the answer. Ankle monitor. Well, first off, the answer is not to, right? The answer is not to let them in like it. But if you're like, well, we have to let them in and we need to monitor them, fine, give them the ankle. You already admitted that you're doing it to some, so just produce more ankle monitors. Why give them a device that Americans, you know, for better or worse, fall over backwards to try to purchase? People I know that are working 40, 50 hours a week can't afford smartphones like these people are getting. But somehow we're said, well, would they need to have this device for tracking? It's absurd. Everything about it. Like, again, none of it passes the smell test. On one hand, we're told that the CDC and the Biden administration is going to go to court to fight the reversal on the mask mandates on planes because we're still in a pandemic. But with Title 42, we're being told, well, it's no longer a pandemic, so we could leave all these people in. And what it does is it shows that they're lying about immigration, but they're also lying about COVID because they're lying about everything. And one thing we have to be fearful from is the establishment that we're fighting against. Never underestimate how bad they want power and what they'll do to maintain it. And, I'm not even talking about, incredibly heinous things. I'm just saying at this point, if they feel, look, we're in trouble in 2022, they might just say, fine, we'll just do a bunch of amnesty then. We'll do a bunch of stuff. We'll take our short-term lumps now, but that will change the concept of America going forward. We'll just do it now so that it won't be able to be reversed. Because once you give amnesty to people, you can't go back and say, okay, we're revoking your amnesty. Once you forgive people's student loans, you can't go back and say, oh, now you have to pay them. And so they might just say, you know what? We'll just do every radical thing we want right now. We'll take our lumps in the short term, and in 4 to 6 years, we think we'll be able to come back in power because what we're doing is so bad that it'll look bad for the next 4 or 6 years, and we'll blame the other side.
That's a scary thought. I really hope you're wrong on that, but definitely is a possibility. So what did you think about Dr. Oz getting endorsed by Trump? Since you're in Pennsylvania, I kind of wanted you to talk about that a little bit.
Terrible. McCormick and Oz are both establishment Kevin McCarthy-esque rhinos. That's who they are. Both of them are incredibly wealthy. Both of them are basically living outside the state of Pennsylvania and came back just to run for Senate. And they're in the mold of sort of the Republican establishment party leadership. And so all of the big name Republicans in my state and with Trump as well are endorsing one or the other. So my Congressman Glenn Thompson, he's the longest serving Republican in Pennsylvania. He endorsed McCormick. Trump endorses Oz. The guy that I lost my congressional campaign to, his name's Fred Keller. He endorsed Oz, I believe, or it doesn't matter. They're basically they're both terrible. And look, Trump has a long history of putting people in positions of power in his administration or endorsing people that are terrible. Robbie Starbuck, for example, is running. I don't know if you followed this saga. Robbie Starbuck's one of the staunchest conservative Republicans out there. He did a lot during Trump's administration as a media person, as a director, kind of pushing forth an agenda that's, kind of making America great and endorsing Donald Trump and the message behind it. The Republicans won't even leave him on the ballot. Trump came out and endorsed a rhino that criticized Trump instead of Robbie Starbuck. So for me, the whole thing is just, I understand that they have a friendship, Trump and Oz. Oz is terrible, and I don't care that Trump endorsed him. And I hope that there's some silver lining to this, which is I'm seeing people that before would have accepted anything Trump said. Let me be clear. I volunteered to get Trump elected. I was offered a job through Trump's campaign, a small job locally, to help him get elected. I wanted Trump to win really bad. I did everything I could to try to make that happen. I was a Trump supporter. I still do support Trump. That doesn't mean I agree with everything he does. And so many Trump supporters were just like, I love the man. No, I love the ideas that the man claimed to stand for. And if he starts endorsing people that don't stand for those ideas, then I don't care that he endorsed them. And I'm starting to see that. I just interviewed someone who's running against Oz and McCormick. Her name's Kathy Barnett. And she is a huge Trump supporter. And basically in our interview, she talked about this. She said, we embraced the ideas of Make America Great Again, and Trump happened to be embracing them. We did not embrace the man of Trump. And so you need to look, who represents America and Make America Great Again better, Dr. Oz or Kathy Barnett? And I think that it's unquestionable that it's Kathy Barnett.
Yeah, so she's actually in third place here in most of the polls. And
it's a statistical tie, basically in the most recent poll. So I talked to a guy named Don McClure, and he's a county commissioner. He's very good at kind of seeing where Republican polling is, and that's basically what he says. He thinks that even when I interviewed him a month ago, he said, "Look, everyone's sleeping on Kathy Barnett. She has a lot going for her, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's going to be in a statistical dead heat." So who knows? One thing that could happen is the vote could be split between the establishment with Oz and McCormick. And so then the sort of more populist, the more sort of people that are concerned about America first, they might come out and say, we're going to all back Kathy Barnett. So I'm hopeful. She sounds good. So.
Yeah, I'm hopeful too. I mean, that would be huge. I think Trump partially endorses people he thinks are going to win, so that then he can say, hey, I endorsed somebody and they won. But I don't know, maybe not. And Trump is just that endorsement. And then I don't know. Do you know who you're supporting? Are you supporting anybody in particular in Ohio? I just don't like J.D. Vance like on a personality level, there's something just
Right.
rubs me wrong way. And I do like Josh Mandel, but then again, Trump gets that endorsement wrong, and I'm just like, dude, what's going on? I don't know. Do you have an
You
opinion
know,
on that primary?
I agree with you 100%. Now, I can't claim to know, I don't know as much about that as Pennsylvania, but that's my looking of it as well. I think that Trump, I think there's a lot of stuff going on with Trump. I don't think that Trump is an ideologue, right? I think Trump is a personality, and he's someone that, by nature of who he was, which is someone that's not afraid to punch back, and he happened to be going against the most heinous people, the most corrupt, incompetent, heinous people, that it set him in a position where people like me and you and millions of other people that support him were like, yes, he's doing all this stuff right because he's punching back at the right people. But that
Yep.
doesn't mean that has a masterful knowledge where it's like, oh, he's able to sift through, the problems in his own party and point to people. I mean, the people that he was, he claimed to be someone that was against interventionism. He appoints John Bolton. It's like that's
Right.
So I don't know what his motivations are and why he supports. I don't know that there's much to it. I think that he's a personality guy. He probably talks
Yeah.
to these people on the phones like, yeah, they kiss my butt in the right way. They sound good. And so he's not looking at like, well, what are the policies? What have they said before they were just kissing his butt? And that's what I think happens.
So okay, let's just. I'm kind of so. I just am so impressed with Ron DeSantis, and like I was a big Trump supporter. I flew a Trump flag behind my stream for years and years and years. I was flying the Trump flag, and so I'm fully big time Trump supporter. But man, Ron DeSantis is just so good, and he is exposing the left and doing it so well. And he's up for re-election. Is it this year or is he in 2024? I can't remember, but he's coming up for re-election. I think it's this year.
Yeah,
But
I think so too.
aren't you just blown away by how impressive Ron DeSantis has been?
If the 2024 primary was coming up now, I would support DeSantis easily over Trump. I would.
Yeah.
I think
Same.
DeSantis represents what Trump did in a fighting spirit and fighting back with none of the baggage. I think that he actually does have the intelligence and the ideology to support conservative causes. He understands, like Trump did, the importance of fighting back and understanding that people like the media are the enemy. But he doesn't have any of that baggage where he's he's unlikable for personal foibles he has. Now, I know what people listening are going to say, but I like Trump. I like Trump's crude language. That's fine. You may have. But there were a lot of conservatives and certainly people in the middle that just found his personality off-putting, and that was reason enough to not vote for him. DeSantis doesn't have any of that. And he can fight back. For example, when DeSantis is going back against the media, instead of just being like, F you, he's actually making articulate points while controlling his emotions, but still being forceful and angry and saying, this is exactly why you're so terrible. Let me explain it. He's actually fighting back in the ways that Trump said he would as president, right? He's going on the offense. That's what he did with Disney. That's what he did with, the bill, Don't Groom Children bill that he pushed forth, So I think now listen, brief caveat to this: never put all of your faith into one elected official. You'll always get burned eventually. So, and, who knows, if he gets elected, maybe he'll do a bunch of stuff I don't like. But right now, he to me is the ideal candidate for president and an ideal representative of what being a Republican should be.
Okay, so Joe Biden's Real Clear Politics approval number is at 41.1. 54% disapprove. And these have gotten worse here in the last month, significantly worse. Having 54 disapprove, I mean that's historically bad. That's worse than almost anybody. The direction of the country is also going way in the wrong direction. 62.4% wrong track. Right direction only 29.8%. So that's just kind of more of the same. That's kind of been how things are going. You know what's so interesting, I think, is I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on this, but we have polling data that literally tells us what are the most important issues facing Americans. What do the American people find most important? And it's always the economy, inflation, jobs, immigration is usually up there. But the Democrats are out there and they're like, global warming is the number one national security threat, and LGBTQ rights is where we got to spend our time and efforts. And I'm just like, why will they not focus on the issues that the American people actually care about?
Oh, their big focus right now is what again? January 6th.
Right. Nobody cares.
They're trying to force feed people. Look, it's so important to them. Everything is. It's like, now I know that we're on YouTube as well, so I'll be very careful choosing my words here. When we were told it was the most secure election ever, that's a bold statement. And the problem with making a statement like that strategically is if one domino falls, it all comes crashing down. So if we find out that one state had a significant amount of corruption or incompetence or accidents that went the other way. Listen, YouTube, I'm not saying that happened. I'm just saying if it was found out that was the case, the whole house of cards comes tumbling down. Similarly, they put everything into January 6th was an insurrection, biggest FBI investigation ever, locking up blue-haired grandmas, putting them in solitary confinement that didn't commit any violent crimes. They have to keep pushing it. And it's not resonating. Just like the whole Russia collusion stuff. 4 years they went on about it. Even when they polled Democrats, Russia was like number 9 on the issues. They did care about climate change. They did care about jobs. They cared about safety and crime and stuff like that. Even Democrats did. And so at this point, the only way they get away with that is because they control the narrative. They control what people are talking about in the media, in these social media spaces. And so they figure, well, if we just have Jimmy Kimmel talk about it every night, and if we have it be trending number 1 on Twitter every night, and if we have the New York Times talking about it every night, then that's what people will be talking about. And it's not working. And even
Totally.
I think that, this is my personal bias. I'll ask you what you think about this. I think that Democrats, there are more Democrats that are willing to support Democrats come hell or high water, no matter what, than there are Republicans that would do that. There are Republicans like that, but I think there's a higher percentage. So when you start to get to like 40% approval, like you're nearing the basement, right? Because at some point, Joe Biden could literally just be like, pulling his pants down on camera and just uttering gibberish. And there are still 30% of people in this country that would be like, I'm all for it. I'm all for it. And so I think that it's getting really bad where even Democrats, like super radical progressives or more moderate Democrats, they're like, what are you doing? Why are we talking about this January 6th? What are you going to do about the economy? What are you going to do about maybe global warming? Maybe that's an issue they care about. But when you look at these polls, the most troubling numbers for Biden and for the Democrats are independents. It's not even close. Independent, I mean, I don't have the polls in front of me, but You're talking 60, 70% are now swinging towards Republican. And that's historic. It really is. And it's going to be bad if they can't do anything.
And the Hispanic numbers. I mean, Joe Biden's approval amongst Hispanics is low 40s too. And that could, I mean, if African Americans or Hispanics sort of start moving away from the Democrat Party, that completely transforms the entire political landscape of the country and results in a completely red wave. I agree with you that the Democrats are much more partisan and sort of just willing to support a Democrat. And frankly, I think a lot of people on the right, it's to a fault. There's so many conservatives. If a conservative or a Republican does one thing wrong, oh, he's the enemy, he's the worst, he's a rhino, he's a globalist, he's a scumbag. It's this really, there is this sort of sense of like purity on the right. And frankly, my New Year's resolution in 2022 was to stop fighting with other conservatives who I agree with 80% of the time on, and like focus on our real enemy. We've got actual Marxists in this country. There are literally full-blown Marxists in America that are trying to take over the country and are being somewhat successful at it. And we've got a bunch of conservatives and Republicans just constantly taking pot shots and attacking other conservatives and Republicans because they disagree with them on one issue, or they're not conservative enough, or they're too conservative, or this, that, or the other thing. And I see it all the time on Twitch, where it's like, I have viewers and people I'm chatting with where we agree 80% of the time, 90% of the time, and then there's that one issue, that they really feel strongly about, and I'm not as full blown on, some issue. And it's like they're my enemy now all of a sudden. And I don't understand why the right is like this. It's really like there's this purity test on the right that if you're not 100% in agreement, then you're a globalist and a rhino.
Now, I will say that I would probably fall into that criticism as well when I'm criticizing Kevin McCarthy for say or Mitch McConnell.
Totally.
But
Yeah.
I think it's warranted in those cases. I do. I think that
agree.
they've exhibited through years of their what they're saying behind the scenes and what they're pushing for. I think that it's warranted. But you're right. For example, I do a lot of debating and stuff on Twitch. There are conservatives that say I'm not conservative enough because on a lot of social policies, I'm more libertarian. So, for example, one policy that a lot of conservatives would be mad at me was I'm for the legalization of marijuana. Now, you might disagree with me on that, or I'm for gay marriage being legal. But that's not a reason when all of these other issues that are very important, the corruption, the cultural issues that we see that are so devastating in many ways. I think that I'm an effective voice for pushing back against that. And I think that you're losing allies by just having this purity test that says, no, it's our way or the highway. For me, if you have an issue that's your most important issue, if someone else agrees with you on that issue, it doesn't matter if you disagree with them on many other issues. You should accept allies anywhere you can. One example is the Second Amendment. I find it hilarious how lefty, you see this every week. I'll see some lefty post this on Twitter. They'll be like, how's this make you feel, Second Amendment people? And it'll be a black family holding guns. And I'll be like, great. It makes me feel great.
Right.
Oh, well, what if a black nationalist group would exercise legally, their rights to carry firearms? That's fine. I support that 100%. Right? Like there's no ambiguity here. And I think that most conservatives and Republicans understand it on that issue of the Second Amendment, but we have to understand that on other issues as well. To me, the most important thing in any candidate is, are you someone who's going to fight corruption and actually stick up for your constituents? I can handle someone that I disagree with on the details if I truly believe they're like, I'm listening to my constituents. I'm trying to do what I think's best for them, because I think we have a large crop of people, almost all of the Democrats, and certainly some Republicans in positions of leadership, they just don't care. To them, it's a job. It's a way to enrich themselves. And to me, that's what we're fighting against. So if you disagree with me on gay marriage, or you disagree with me on, sort of insurance policy, or exactly what to do with the dreamers, nuanced disagreements, it's not a reason to, ostracize people and say that you won't support them or deal with them.
Yeah, I think we'd be a lot better off if all Republicans and all conservatives in the United States all just agreed that, hey, quit attacking other conservatives and Republicans all the time. You don't have to agree with these people all the time. I always draw this parallel, like say you're in a trench and you're fighting a war, and you and your buddy are sitting there, and you're shooting over the trench, and you're shooting at communists, and you're in a war with communists, and you're fighting communists, and then your buddy's sitting next to you who's literally shooting at communists with you. He says one thing that you disagree with. He's not conservative enough on one issue, and so you turn and you shoot him, and then you're sitting there by yourself fighting communists. Like, this is just insane. It happens in the GOP all the time, and it happens a lot too with like these Republicans from New York, or places like that, where they're in these sort of less conservative districts, but they're Republicans, but they have to be sort of not as conservative to win in their district, and everybody wants to primary them and rhino and call them rhinos and stuff like that. And it's like, I understand that, and I agree, and I'd rather have a more conservative person in there, but we also have to recognize the reality of some of these districts where it's like if you nominated like a Trump-like figure or a Ron DeSantis or something, like, you're just going to lose that district. So it's a tough thing to draw. I mean, it's a tough line to draw, because you obviously want the most conservative candidate, but you also want to win.
I mean, kind of an example of that, I remember locally for one of the positions here, in 2018 that was being ran for, I was looking at the Republicans and Democrats positions. If I just sent you the Democrats position, you'd be like, this is a staunch Republican, pro Second Amendment, all of this stuff that was Republican. It's just, they were like, I think we should raise property taxes a little and have more programs. Other than that, just line by line, you'd be like Republican, Republican, Republican. But there's no chance of an actual full-blown Democrat winning here. So the Democrats are smart. They're like, we'll put someone that on one issue we favor more than the Republicans. But in order to win, they're going to have to basically be conservative on all these other issues. The same is true the opposite way. If you're in, super blue city and you're the Republican running and you're standing up and you're just like, we need to kick all the illegal immigrants out, you're going to lose because they're just not going to accept that there. But if you're like, I agree, the people that are here, we need to do something with, but we need to secure the border. I agree, we need to do better with the medical insurance and things like that. But I'm a staunch Second Amendment supporter. Then you have a chance. And the other thing I wanted to say real quick that, I thought of when you were talking about Hispanic vote and black votes and things like that, like the reality, I've said this for years. I've been talking to the Republican Party. The reason that those votes have been reliably Democrat isn't because Democrat positions are better for these people or align more for them. It's because they've controlled the narrative successfully. The reality is that a lot of Hispanics and a lot of black people, obviously no group's monolithic, but many, many of them are incredibly conservative culturally, incredibly. And the thing that they have that many people that are white don't have is they're not afraid to say it. They're not afraid to be, right? Because as a white person, there are so many people that are like, I can't say what I really think about transgender athletes competing against. I can't say it. I'll lose my job. I'll get canceled. I'll be called a bigot. But if you're someone that you feel has, paid your dues, if you're someone who's black, you'd be like, nah, I don't care. What are you going to do? Call me a bigot? I'm going to have a bunch of white people calling me a bigot.
That's
and so
point,
I think that, I think that you see, there's a lot of people in my chat that were saying this. They're like, I'm Hispanic. One of the big issues with Hispanics is this transgender stuff where they don't care. They don't have to pretend. They're just like, no, we don't accept this. Or the Latinx stuff. They're like, no, we don't accept this. We think this is nonsense. And again, it's an example of Democrats overplaying their hand. That it was always going to happen when you build your coalition on this sort of cultural Marxist oppressor versus oppressed with all these immutable characteristics. Inevitably, it would fracture because you can't maintain a coalition based purely on victimhood. Because eventually groups are going to disagree with each other. And I think that's what you're seeing happening. And the Democrats are scrambling to say they need Trump. Like they need that figure that they could focus all of their ire on. But
that's why they're so obsessed with January 6th is they want to relitigate January 6th over and over again because it keeps Trump in the news. And it's amazing. They talk about Trump. And, I don't think Trump is doing too many favors with some of the stuff that he says about the 2020 election, because let's just be honest, that's not going to work well that doesn't work well for Republicans to win elections, to go around saying the problem is election.
This: he's making it personal, right? He needs to talk about it in the abstract and not personal. So when he says, I was cheated, it was stolen from me. Like I have this friend, Tom, who's a Democrat that ran my campaign when I ran for Congress. It was basically me, him, and my wife. He's a reasonable Democrat, right? We obviously have ideological disagreements, but he's not insane, right? He's a reasonable person. So I always try to think, what would Tom think, right, when he hears this? And, for me, Tom would be open to be like, okay, if there were shenanigans election night, I'm open to hearing them. But before I accept that it was stolen, I want to see some proof. I want to see some smoking gun proof. And there's a lot of people, I think, like that if you showed them definitive proof, not just 80% that it's most likely that happened, but like definitive proof, they would be willing to accept that. But the problem is when Trump's just kind of out there bombastically like, I was cheated, it was stolen. It sounds like it's me. And there's a way to say what he's saying without it being that way. And furthermore, I think that I will always be grateful. Donald Trump did more positive for this country than I will ever do. Let me be clear about that, right? He, through his career and the wealth that he had accumulated, was able to strike a blow to be someone outside of the establishment, or at least that was looked at as outside the establishment, that stopped their hegemony on sort of a Bush, Clinton, Obama sort of dynasty that they had going on. But at this point, I think he could do better outside of the presidency. I think he could do better as a personality, as a media figure. I really do. I think that his job, he should be going around finding talented conservatives and sort of pushing them to the moon, whether it be culturally or whether it be politically. I think Trump would be very well suited for that. And I think at this point, it's time to leave someone like Desantis go. And the other thing I'll say real quick on this is, remember when Bush was Hitler? Bush was the worst person ever. And then Trump came in and they're like, well, Bush wasn't that bad, said the Democrats. They're now going to make DeSantis seem like he's 10 times worse than Trump. That's what they're going to do. They're already laying the ground. Well, Trump, it turns out Trump wasn't that bad, but DeSantis, my goodness, this guy's out of control. So that's going to be what they try to do, because they need that enemy.
They do. That's why I always push back on anybody ever saying, "Oh, we shouldn't support so and so because, you know, he's got so much baggage, or, you know, the media destroyed him. The media, everybody believes that person is the most horrible person, blah, blah, blah." And it's like, dude, they're going to do that to every single Republican. We cannot allow the media to destroy our people, because if we stop supporting a Republican politician just because the media has portrayed them as the most evil person in the world, then we'll never have anybody that we can support, because the media is going to do that to every single Republican candidate, and they'll do it to DeSantis. And the most hilarious thing is they did it to, you know, Mitt Romney when Romney was it's like you've got an actual like liberal like joke establishment hack, and the media painted him to be some like radical, you know, right wing, you know, racist, whatever, you name it. Quick before we go, do you think the Elon Musk Twitter takeover will go through? Do you think he'll actually bring free speech back to the platform? Do you think it's going to impact the midterms? Do you think Trump comes back?
Okay, so there's a lot to unpack there. I don't know if he'll actually go through with the purchase. I was just reading an article that said that, let me preface it by saying this. The story is not that Elon might buy Twitter and that it seems to be going through. The story is the reaction that we see from people in positions of power to it. And so they have outed, even if it falls through, the Democrat Party has firmly entrenched themselves as the party of anti-free speech, the party of censorship. Without a doubt. It's undoubtedly. So, like, everything they say in defense of this outs them more. Ari Melbourne, or the other day, did you see this clip on MSNBC? He was like,
where he was like, what if Twitter actually censored the other side?
They could remove their candidate. They could kind of turn the algorithm so that conservatives, so that liberals, it's like,
that's stunning.
Exactly. So they're admitting that they know this is to steal and affect elections, but they need it. And I've said this from the get-go. It's not that they're worried that Elon Musk is going to come in and treat the left like Twitter has treated the right. They're worried that it'll be an even platform. And that's unacceptable to them. They know they can't win in that world. And so that's the most important thing, that's been outed. Will it go through? I don't know. There's going to be a lot of pressure. Never underestimate the power and the corruption of these people. For example, I saw an article today that said, here are reasons it won't go through. Tesla's reliant on things in China, and China will not allow free speech on the platform. The EU has basically came out and said, we're going to force Twitter to start censoring harmful information. And so Twitter, that's such a huge market. Twitter would lose out if they don't do that. And companies in the United States like Apple have said, we won't put you on our app store if you don't censor the people we want. Now, all of this, that's in a straight news story. You're like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Maybe Elon won't go through with it. But if you read slightly between the lines there, that's an admission that all of these people in positions of power politically and culturally, including corporations, rely on, or ideologically bent on censoring people that are conservative and that they disagree with. That's what it is. So to me, I do think it'll affect the midterms. I think that right now you're seeing a boost in people that are conservative on Twitter, getting more views, getting more follows. And the reason's not because Elon's bought it yet or because more conservatives are signing up. The reason's because Twitter's burying the bodies, right? They're like, oh, we got to hurry up and change this in case Elon comes in, because he'll be able to see exactly what we did. I would almost guarantee the amount of documents being shredded, digitally, of course, it's astronomical right now.
Yeah, I mean, but that could be one of the great benefits of Elon Musk taking over, would be to do an audit of Twitter and the censorship and who made these decisions, and who at Twitter was coordinating with Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and everywhere else. They all banned Trump sort of in coordination, and they've banned Alex Jones in coordination with each other. And I'd love to see all of the communications about that and stuff like that. So that could be a huge part of it. But you're right. It's the entire ecosystem that Twitter can't just suddenly go free speech. I mean, it'd be taken off the app stores. It's
and it would. The funny thing is, I mean, again, Like, look at there was a chart I saw that it was people that worked at certain tech companies and who they donated to. Twitter, it's 98.9% of their employees donated to Democrats, right? Tesla, that Elon Musk owns, it's 93.7. That's what Democrats are screaming about. Not that all. Keep in mind, Elon Musk is not a conservative. He's not. He's a liberal-minded person.
Right.
He, by any definition, would be considered a left-wing person. They're freaking, and you have to understand, Elon Musk isn't saying, I'm going to censor Democrats and censor left-wing. He's not saying that. They are so used. The people that you see on the left in Twitch and other places that are, these big progressive lefties, the radicals, the revolutionaries, they rely on the very corporations and the very establishment powers that they claim to be revolting against so much that to say, oh, it'll go from 99% in support of me to only 93%. That's the end of democracy. That's what that's right. Democracy's in danger now. And to me, that's what people are starting to wake up. Maybe the deal falls through with Elon. Hell, maybe Elon's doing it just because he wants to sell it, make a profit and a buck. I don't know.
Yeah.
What I do know is this. There's only a chance things get better. It's not going to get any worse. Elon's not going to censor worse than's already happened. So I say roll the dice. Yeah. I'm supporting him.
Totally. I'm fully supporting him. One thing I love to do, and I'd encourage you might try this one time in when you're debating a liberal or a leftist on these issues, is ask them to explain to you why free speech is a good thing. They can't do it. They can't actually justify it, and because they'll claim that they support free speech. They'll claim, yeah, I agree with free speech, but misinformation is harmful and dangerous and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, well, you really don't. But I did that on one of these Twitch debate panels. I was like, you guys are so uninformed. You don't even know why we value free speech as a society. You don't even know the underlying rationale for why open discussion of ideas is a good thing, including wrong statements, including misinformation. That's protected under the First Amendment. And there's, of course, a rationale and theory behind why it's better for society to allow everybody to speak, even if some of those people are speaking stuff that's hateful or misinformation or anything like that. And there's there's political philosophers that have written books about these things. And these leftists, they can't explain it. They can't explain to you why free speech is a good thing and why we should value it as society. And it's pretty telling. But that's an hour. Do you want to just kind of give your last saying, then we'll be done?
Yep. I'll just say this real quick on that they'll always refer to the exception, right? So they'll say something like this. They'll say, well, you don't want pedophilia on Twitter, do you? And you're like, well, of course not. Aha! See? Then we've admitted that free speech isn't absolute. Well, of course it's not absolute. Right? We could all agree there are certain things that just by their very nature are heinous and shouldn't be on platforms such as this. But when we're talking things that aren't calls to violence, things that are opinions, they should be allowed. They absolutely should be. And they don't embrace that mentality. I mean, who was it? Right. Man, I'm really bad. It was the whip. Cornyn, it might have been Cornyn. I remember a clip of him like 3 years ago where he said on CNN, he was like, if the Bill of Rights came up for a vote today, it would not be popular with Democrats. It would be rejected by Democrats. And that includes the First Amendment, the Second Amendment. So, yeah, you're absolutely right. So just to summarize, reasons to be positive in these 2022 midterms, to me, it's not a foregone conclusion. We need to keep fighting. The primaries, don't sleep on the primaries. Do your part as someone to go out and inform yourself locally what the positions are. Yeah. Don't just say, oh, Trump endorsed this person or this person endorsed this person. Find those positions because it does you no good if you get a bunch of people like Kevin McCarthy that behind the scenes are going to be operating to censor actual conservatives and positions like that. But I'm more positive every day. The Democrats are not gaining ground in my estimation.
I agree. We started. I totally feel that same way. And we started out this 10-part series saying we were very positive, but we didn't want to be too overconfident. We were cautioning about being too overconfident, but it feels like the Democrats are just going off a cliff. But I wasn't as prepared this time. I didn't have like a list. Usually I like to have like a list of like the biggest news stories of the last 30 days, and we can kind of talk about how those impact the election. I didn't have that, so it was a little bit less organized this time. But man, we're already 6 months out from the election, and we'll be halfway there on the 10-part series next month. So thanks so much, Rob.
Thanks. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, we'll talk to you later.